Hello and welcome to Honest Car Reviews. My name is Rick and this is the Volkswagen ID4 GTX. It is purely electric, and in this review I'm going to find out if the GTX is the model of the ID4 that you should buy. Regarding design, Volkswagen has done something completely different than what they've done previously. Well, you can see some similarities to the Golf, namely the design of the front lights, but almost everything is completely new. And the GTX is of course the top dog in the ID4 segment, which means that it should distinguish itself. And apart from this extra optioned King's Red metallic paint, the front will tell you that this lower is in dark plastic instead of grey plastic as in the regular ID4 models. So in the front there isn't that much that really distinguishes the GTX from the ID4. This is a homage, or trying to be what the GTI models are. It is trying to be a performance version of a normal model. And the GTI isn't that extreme, but in comparison I think that this is really tame. The changes are really tame. I mean, this darker plastic and this design feature, there isn't that much that have been changed. The rims are an extra option. They are aerodynamic and they hide really large brakes. In the rear there are actually drum brakes, which is quite unique. We went from drum brakes to regular discs and pads, and now we're going back to drum brakes because you have regenerative braking, you have so much tech that works in the front. I really like the design of the ID4, and especially with this King's Red metallic paint. The design pops even more. The GTX blacked out badging around suggests that this is a GTX, and you also have this ID4 style and ID3 style rear lights. Looks quite aggressive actually, and the whole shape and the proportions really works, since the lower part is in the red and the top part is in black, so you have a two-tone which really helps lower the visual print of the ID4. We're now at the rear compartment of the ID4 and it is spacious. Underneath this rather plasticky and flimsy and oily mat, we have some storage where you can have your charging cables. And underneath here you have an even smaller storage. And underneath all of this we have the batteries, of course. And the batteries are low down in the car. We have a really low center of gravity. That's good for handling, but this is also an SUV, a crossover, which means that you can't expect it to behave like perhaps a Golf GTI. Hey, and don't, oh shit. Yeah, but don't forget that these rims are really easy to scratch because they are quite far out compared to other rims. So if you have this car, you need to be really careful when parking close to curbs. And since it is an electric car, the wheelbase, or at least the tires, are really far out in the corners, which means that you have a lot of space as a passenger, as a driver, which means that my knees are not hitting at all and it feels spacious in here. Yes, they have used a lot of dark materials, but you have some rather weird blue inserts on the side doors and some red stitching. The seats, however, are some fake Alcantara, some white stitching, and they are quite soft in the middle, but are actually really comfortable. You have a huge panoramic sunroof which really goes from the front to the rear, and it gives a lot of extra light in the cabin, which is needed since it is quite dark. And I haven't forgot that this is four-wheel drive. It has 299 horsepower. The power that comes from the back is the same as in the regular ID4 models. but in the front you have about 90 horsepower. So you have independent forward drive. And I'm now in the driver's seat of the ID.4, and in front of me I have two screens. One which is just behind the steering wheel, the digital gauge cluster, which is really simple. You have the speed, you have some information of the car in front of you, the radar, some range information, and that's about it. You have a huge 12-inch optional digital gauge cluster, and it has the same layout as any other modern Volkswagen. Looks okay, does its job, nothing special, but it works. Interior wise, you have a lot of piano plastics, which means that they will scratch easily and the fat on your fingers will stain them like really quickly. But the car is obviously meant to be used. You have a lot of storage, easy to reach storage, and the charger for your phone is mounted just at your hand, so you can take it really easy in and out, really simple. I really like the usability of this ID.4, and it is a bit sportier than the regular ID.4, but that doesn't mean that it's uncomfortable. Yes, you have two 45mm tires in front and 255 in the rear, so you have a lot of traction, but that doesn't mean that you have a lot of tire noise, and that's good, since it is still a really usable large crossover. However, there are some things that I'm not so sure about. First, the part underneath the digital gauge cluster. They've gone away from that center buttons and go with a more horizontal layout, and when you press them you can really feel the plastic flexing. Also, this really minimalistic digital gauge cluster tells you everything that you need to know, but it looks cheap. Also, this blue side door part that I talked about before feels rather out of place. It is nice that it is a bit more environmentally friendly, but I don't feel that it goes together well with the rest of the interior. Also, the touch functions. When I want the windows to go down, I press the buttons. But if I want the rear windows to go down, I have to press this little touch, and it doesn't register all the time. I'm pushing it right now, and now it took 5 times for it to register, and that's just unnecessary when there is an alternative that works better. This is a GTX version, which means that it should be fun to drive and be really quick and responsive, and it is. 300 horsepower, just under 500 Newton meters, and that response that you can only get in electric engines, I mean, it goes when you push the pedal to the metal. But it weighs over 2.2 tons. Which means that even though it has a low center of gravity with the batteries low down, and you have wide tires, you have a steering rack that has a changeable geometry or response depending on how fast you're turning the steering wheel, and the suspension has been lowered by 15 millimeters, you still drive a crossover, and it is more fun to drive than the generic crossover, especially since it is electric and you have that low center of gravity. But to say that it is similar to a GTI experience is a bit far-fetched. The base price of the ID.4 GTX is about 55,000 euros, but this particular model costs about 68. And if I want to buy a larger crossover for about 55 to 60,000 euros, there's quite a lot of cars to choose from. Namely the Ford Mustang Mach-E, the Skoda Enyaq, the Tesla Model Y, the Kia EV6, the Hyundai Ioniq 5. Yeah, there are a lot of cars to choose from. And since these are electric cars with a battery that is low down, and they're quite heavy, which means that they need to have large tires, the way that they handle is quite similar. So it comes down to what happens after you buy the car. After sales, service, reparations, customer support. So if you like the Volkswagen brand, what they're doing and what they're producing, go and get the Volkswagen ID.4 GTX. You won't be disappointed by the car. And that's my final review for the Volkswagen ID.4 GTX. See you next time.